and okay, thank you. So he is going to report on some of that. It also includes the summer field school, I think. Bill, were you ready to take it away?
Yeah, I can do that just fine. Thanks, Jack. I really appreciate that. So here we're going to give a kind of a brief overview of several different excavation campaigns, not just two, but several excavation campaigns at the site I've been working at most recently and most intensively, which is 9DW276 Rice Farm. We call it 9DW276 because that's the actual site number. There's three parts to that. 9 is, it indicates what state it is. So it's in Georgia. DW is Dawson County. And this is the 276th site in Dawson County. That's why it's called 9DW276. It's also called Rice Farm. I just want to have a really quick explanation of that. It's named after the family that owns the property, the Rice family. This site has nothing to do with historic or pre-contact rice cultivation, rice gathering, or even threshing. It has everything to do with the name of the family that owns the property. There's a lot of confusion on that. I just want to provide that clarification. This is a site that I really enjoy working at. And so I'm going to present a brief overview of where the site's located and what work's been done there. And just a quick pop culture reference for you. At times I will go off on explaining this site. I love talking about it. So it may appear that I will be channeling Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, especially that episode where he's looking for Pepe Silva, because I just love talking about this site so much that I can get completely enraptured in it. So if I do, please stop me and tell me to dial it back a bit. Okay, Jack, this site is really fun. So let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at where the Rice Farm site is. In order for me to really explain this, I can't do it alone. This report is a report of the excavations that were conducted in 2021. And so it's not just my work, but it's the work of my students and my colleagues. And so I wanted to include every one of them, students and colleagues, in no particular order, except for the order that UNG's bookstore loves to categorize its books, because if you find your book, you've won, because you can't, there's no rhyme or reason the way they categorize the books. But they're in no particular order here. These are all the participants from our 2021 campaigns. And of course, some nice group photos or goofy photos of them. Some of these individuals have given brag talks before. In the bottom right, you see Brian McConnell, who just gave a talk a few months back about his work with Roman cauldrons. And then on the left image, kind of in the center, in the back, in the brown t-shirt, is Dr. Scott Kirk. He's given a talk on castles in Europe a couple years ago. All right, so I really can't do this alone. So some of them they've all been invited into this talk, but I don't know if they're here. Let me quickly scroll through the, oh yeah, I see a couple of them. I'm asking them to unmute themselves, but they don't have to say anything yet. And then I will ask questions, and if they want to contribute, they can. I think I'm working my way through, just want to really kind of call them out, because why not, right? I'm the one driving here, so I can do that. Okay, so the Rice Farm site, 9DW276, it's located in Dawson County in North Georgia, and it's situated on the floodplain adjacent to the Etowah River. The Etowah River being so famous for the Big Etowah site, located way downriver from where we're at. The floodplain along the river here is a part of what's known as the Big Savannah. And the Big Savannah is a topographical feature that's essentially a big broad valley that created a really nice floodplain that had really rich soils, which really helped to facilitate agriculture early on even. This site was first discovered in 2018 by the landowner. And the landowner, the son of the landowner, came to me because he was a student in my class, actually. And he said, I think my dad has a site on the land. And I said, okay. went out there for a visit, and sure enough, he's got a big site. So in 2018, we did a little bit of ground penetrating radar work. We did some survey in the agricultural fields. He's got some gardens, and then we did 4 test units, and only 4 1x1 meter test units. We really didn't do too much work in 2018. We then returned in 2019 and it intensified. So this site is situated in an ideal location for both research and instruction. I can teach students how to do archaeology while pursuing specific research questions and research goals. That way we can learn about the site, we can contribute to our understanding of the archaeological record in the not only at the site, but in the region as well. And students get to learn how to do this. Like I said, we've been growing in intensity over the past couple of years. On the right, you have a map of the excavation units, all those little squares. Each one of those is a 1x1 meter test unit that a lot of effort went into excavating and recording. We have, there's 141 of those on this image, but there are currently 147 of them that have been excavated. We're actually in the field right now, and I'll give you an update on that soon. So like I said, in 2018, we did a GPR survey, ground penetrating radar survey, and we excavated 4 1x1 meter units. In 2019, we returned, we did a magnetometer survey. It's another kind of survey where you're using remote sensing techniques to take a look at what's under the ground and tell you where to dig, essentially. In that season, we dug 60 1x1 meter test units. This was the result of a combined effort of numerous volunteers from UNG, from the Blue Ridge Archaeology Guild, the Greater Atlanta Archaeological Society, the Gwinnett Archaeological Research Society, as well as other universities in the region. We had a field school in the summer of 2019 where students learned how to do excavation. And in that field school and in that whole field season, really, we identified 2 different structures, 2 buildings. One of them is located down on the south end in the gardens where we can't really excavate very often because it's planted. And the other was located up north of the gardens in that big area that looks like a big block kind of on the right. That big odd looking block, that's really, there's a reason that it looks that way. We'll get to that. As we all know, in 2020, we started dealing with COVID, and we're still dealing with COVID. So we did not have any kind of field work that was ground disturbing in 2020, but we did conduct another more extensive ground penetrating radar survey. And that identified other locations across the site where we should test to see if there are subsurface cultural remains, if there's parts of a village there, essentially. Finally, then in the 2021 field season, we actually had a small excavation campaign in March of this year where we investigated structure 1 further. We wanted to fully excavate structure 1. And while we were doing that, we inadvertently discovered another structure, structure 3, but we didn't realize it at the time. That was in March. In May and June, we returned for the 2021 Archaeological Field School. That's where we followed out a weird little hunch I had, and we found structure 3, and we also found structure 4. We'll talk about those in a few minutes. And so we in 2021 so far, we've excavated more than 80 1x1 meter units. We really have intensified what we've done out there on the site. And like I said, we discovered 2 additional structures this year. That's structures 3 and structures 4. So one of the first things we find when we excavate out there, once we get below the plow zone, which is the top layer of the soil where it's been plowed over and over and over, but during previous agriculture, we find these plow scars. These are the very bottoms of the marks, the skid marks left by the plows, essentially, as they go through the soil. And these scars are left there at the very bottom of that zone that's plowed. So we give them feature numbers just like everything else, and we map them. And then this is something that really nobody ever gets to see because it's not pre-contact. You know, most people find this incredibly boring, but I actually love this image because one of my colleagues, Brian McConnell, who gave a talk a couple months ago, he was with us when we were excavating in March. And one day, one of those really slow days in archaeology where it's a slow morning and everybody's still waiting for their coffee to kick in, you know, he just goes, wait, hold on. And we're all looking at him like, whoa, what are we missing? And he goes, I think I got it. And he goes, I think we have enough evidence to suggest that there was agriculture here. And we almost threw our coffee at him because of course there's agriculture there. We have hundreds and hundreds of plow scars. But it really made me think about these plow scars some more. And I actually started teasing out a pattern here. We have some plow scars that are narrow and are very, very linear, very straight, especially the ones that kind of go from the top left to the bottom right. Those appear to be equidistant to each other. And I think that's probably tied back to a tractor driving back and forth. But the other ones, especially on the far right, that get really wide, they kind of meander a bit. I'm thinking that those are made in a different manner. And I have to really find the expert to look at these, but it appears that those might be older, much older, maybe hand plowed scars from when maybe you had an ox or a horse pulling a plow and somebody behind it. Because they do meander a bit, they kind of wave back and forth, and I don't think they're as straight. So we do kind of have maybe two different phases of agriculture occurring in the post-contact historic era. And that's just one of those things that most people don't get to see on a site. If we take all those different plow scars that we encounter, we have to map them. We map everything we find. But if we take those and we eliminate those from the map, our map gets really interesting. Here's where we have a simplified map of that big excavation block that I showed that's on the far right of the area that we have this as a site. And I've cleaned it up a lot where we've taken the posts that are structural posts. These are holes in the ground where there was somebody dug a hole, they put a wooden post in the ground, and that was a part of a house. It formed a wall. So if you want to build a wall, you can dig a bunch of holes, stick a bunch of sticks in it, weave some other sticks between them, coat it with mud, and you've got a nice wall. And that's exactly what was happening here. We have three different structures. The red one is structure 1, the blue one is structure 3, or sorry, the green one is structure 3, and the purple one on the bottom is structure 4. Structure 2 is located further south in the garden area, and there's not much of it there, but it's clearly a structure. We're not going to talk about structure 2 because we really don't know much about it. We identified it, but we can't really study it because it's under cultivation and we don't want to destroy the crops. So when we take all those plow scars away, we can see all this really cool stuff. There's more posts out there than just these. These are the ones that are clearly associated with buildings. The yellow are all pit features. So if we think about a pit, if you want to bury something, let's say you have a bunch of garbage or you're cleaning out a campfire, right? You want to bury it somewhere. You dig a hole in the ground, you put it in there. Or if you are a Native American and you grow crops, you need to store them somewhere. One place that you can store them is in a pit. You can dig a hole in the ground, line it with clay, and store your food in there. And then throughout the year, you go back and get the food out. And at the end of the year, the very bottom of it will probably have a little water in there. It'll be a little mildewy, so you won't eat that stuff, but you can fill it in with garbage at that point. That's what many of these different pits are. Not every one of them, but many of them are simple pits that were reused as garbage pits. And we can learn a lot about those past cultures by looking at their garbage. Okay, so let's talk about the way I want to talk about the site is to focus here on these three structures, the area around these three structures, and really, this site has made me rethink my concept of community, because we really don't have a lot of sites where we have multiple structures that are clearly evident and that are really close together, packed in like this. Most of my research is actually in the Mediterranean. I'm trained as a Mediterranean archaeologist. I have another research project in Sicily that I run. And there we get houses and we think about community, and we get these dense urban environments in the late Iron Age and Archaic periods, stuff that's about 2,500 years ago. And this kind of reminds me of that. And I thought about that. Well, what about the sense of community? What do these buildings represent to the people that live there, who lived in these, who used them, who created them, and how were those people interrelated to each other, not just biologically interrelated, not just familially interrelated, but also how were they interrelated in terms of their economic networks, their social networks, their marriage patterns. There's a lot of things we can think about. So I'm really starting now. I'm only at the beginning of starting to think about this. When we're excavating these features, these sites, and actually all these structures, we're finding stone tools and we're finding pre-contact pottery. A lot of the stone tools in North Georgia are made out of quartz because quartz is frankly everywhere. You get low quality quartz up through some high quality crystal quartz that looks almost like glass. It's gin clear. Most of the stone tools we find are the lower quality quartz. There are some crystal quartz artifacts that we found, not just flakes, but we actually have some small bladelets, tiny little sharp blades. We also have some chert artifacts, and chert is a different type of material. That's the stuff that people usually make the really nice arrowheads that people think of. They're making those out of chert. In North Georgia, there's really not much chert available. There is a chert outcrop that's well known, that's kind of up in Northwest Georgia, and that's called Ridge and Valley chert, and R&V chert, sometimes you see it. And that stuff is made, it's really dark, a dark, deep charcoal gray. Sometimes you get banding, or you get some kind of wavy changes where it looks kind of smoky and white mixed in with it. But Ridge and Valley chert is pretty good stuff. We do get quite a bit of Ridge and Valley chert artifacts, but really the majority of the stone tools are quartz. If we find chert flakes, if we find chert artifacts, it's a good day, because it tells us more about their economic relations, because they're not getting it locally. They have to get it from Northwest Georgia. The stone tools, just to give you a heads up, the stone tools for Rice Farm and all the lithic debitage, all the flakes and all the bits that were chipped off when they were making stone tools, all of that stuff is actually being studied by a colleague of mine at Towson University in Maryland. And she and I are going to start writing a manuscript for publication probably next month. We've been working on a long-term project, and we're kind of waiting until after I finish the current excavation campaign that I'm on, so I can send her all that material, and then we can have material for all those different contexts. In addition to that, we have pre-contact pottery. This pre-contact pottery, there's a lot of it. We've, as of the 2018 and 2019 seasons, not including anything recovered in 2021, we have 3,062 fragments of pottery. The vast majority of that comes from the Cartersville series, which means that it's stamped, and it either has a simple stamp, so they took a wooden paddle and they carved some grooves, some parallel grooves into the wooden paddle, and then pressed that into the clay when it was still wet, and that would create a design around the pot. Simple stamp, we also get some check stamp, where you take that paddle, that wooden paddle, and you kind of create a checkerboard pattern of different cut marks. And then you press that in, it creates kind of like a checkerboard pattern, or a kind of a tic-tac-toe board that goes across the whole pot. And then there's some other stuff. So there's linear check stamps, and more bolded checked stamp, but mainly Cartersville series. And that all that Cartersville series pottery is dated from the Middle Woodland period. It's all associated with this Middle Woodland period. And that Middle Woodland period ranges from 600 BCE to about 300 CE. So we're looking at right around 2,000 years ago. Now, we've done some carbon dating on our site. We have a couple different carbon dates. We have some acorn that is excellent for carbon dating. Our carbonized acorn shells came back at 1800 BP, which means basically that they're about 1,800 years old. Our wood charcoal, we have some oak, some carbonized oak that we've also sent in for carbon dating. That came back at 1850 BP. I can't remember what the plus or minus was. I think it was plus or minus 20. It was a pretty good date. Again, that shows that it's about 1,850 years old, right? So we have a pretty tight range, and that is firmly set within that Middle Woodland period. So the Middle Woodland cultures of North Georgia, they were people who were just beginning to farm. They're gardening, really. They're not intensely farming. They're still hunting, they're still gathering, but they're starting to settle in these hamlets and into small villages. We don't know too much about them because there's really only a few good sites that have been excavated, especially with modern techniques. There was some work with the WPA in the 1930s, but really modern techniques, there's only a few sites that have been thoroughly excavated that showed architectural remains. And there's some very good work that's been done, but there's not a lot of it. So we still don't know too much about these people and about the lifestyles they had, the relations they had with each other, and the distant networks that they maintained. So those are some of the big things I really wanted to explore with this site. So let's talk about some of these individual structures, because to me, this is the fun part of this site. We find projectile points, arrowheads, we find pottery, and I'm actually a pottery analyst. That's what I do. But finding stuff is fun, yeah, and you learn some stuff about it. But I like to tell my students that, and I like to tell everybody, whether they're a visitor on site or whether they're a student, we as archaeologists don't collect stuff. We collect data because we want to learn about those past cultures. And that data can be the arrowheads we find, the pottery we find, the seeds and nutshells that we find. They can be the stories that elders pass down through oral traditions. We study the data because that data helps us to understand and contextualize the past cultures that we're studying. So here we have structure one. Structure one was first identified in 2019. We only dug here at structure one because that GPR we did, that ground penetrating radar, suggested we had a really good, strong anomaly right where that big yellow circle is in the middle. And so we said, well, let's target it. Let's go back to that location, relocate it with the GPR again, and we'll put a test trench on it and see what it is. And so that's what we did. And we actually found a very big hearth. This is a big fire pit. It measures about 1.4 meters across. That's pretty big. Within it, you have a lens of carbonized material and then some bunch of rock that was placed in there that's burned and cracked in situ. And then it was filled in very, very quickly. There's no evidence of food. We don't have any animal bones. We have almost no pottery in it. We don't suspect that it was an earth oven. An earth oven is a thing where you can dig a hole in the ground, put a fire in there, get it going really hot, throw a bunch of rocks in there, get them going really hot, and then you put your meat or your food in there and then cover it up. And then you come back later and dig it up and it's all cooked at that point. It keeps the covering it up, helps you to keep it warm. And we don't think they did that because there's no evidence that they came back and returned to it once they filled it in. And when they filled it in, they filled it with very clean fill, very clean fill. So we were really kind of curious about that. And we started expanding around it. And we hit these alignments of posts that formed walls. And it wouldn't make sense to have an earth oven inside of a structure. They're going to be smoky. They're going to be very hot. It's going to be, I guess you could have one inside of a structure. I have a colleague, actually Dr. Melissa Baltus, who's going to be giving the talk next month. She mentioned to me that she worked on a project outside St. Louis years ago where they had a earth oven with a windbreak around it. And I thought, well, maybe, yeah, I mean, you might want to have a windbreak around it. That would make sense. But this thing, I think, is too substantial of a structure to be just a windbreak. If you look at this structure on it's square, right? You can see that the square is oriented with the corners pointing roughly north, south, east, and west on the cardinal directions. But you see there's an entryway on the west end, on that left side. It's a double posted entry. There's actually a pit across that entrance. We excavated that pit very carefully. We did not find any cultural material in it. It was very shallow. We're really kind of puzzled by that. One of my colleagues recently said that he's worked on some Middle Woodland structures up in Ohio where they had a a ramp that would go down. These were semi-subterranean structures, but they only went down maybe 3 or 4 inches, he said. And you'd have a ramp that goes down and then a log placed across the entryway. So you would have to step over the log. And he suggested maybe that pit was where a log had been laid, so you'd have to step over it and you would know you're at the bottom of the ramp. I don't know. We have to think about that some more. As you can see, that this map shows some of those other pits. The yellow are the pits. There's no other pits within this structure. If this was a domestic structure, I would expect there to be some pits outside, which we do have pits outside. I would also expect maybe some other pits on the interior. We don't have any of those. We also have some symmetry within the structure itself. If you look, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Tony, can you, or Jack, can you let me know if you can see my mouse?
Yes, you can see your mouse, Bill.
Okay, so if you see this portion right here, you have 3 posts. You have the same thing over on this side with 2 posts, followed up by a single post. This one's followed up by 2 posts. So it seems that there's some symmetry here. We're trying to decide if this could be evidence of internal divisions, kind of walls within, or if it's tied back to structural elements that might have, maybe they had benches or they had bunks or beds situated in there. We don't know. It's just something that hasn't preserved. Remember that this area has been plowed. So the original floor surface is long gone. What we're looking at is whatever is preserved below the base of the plow zone, below the base of that, where the plow blades went. So we really don't have any idea of what this could be tied to, but we're trying to figure that out. So structure 1 I think it's a really nice one. I'm really excited to have found structure 1. But when we excavated it, we also found a couple others. So we noticed when we were excavating structure 1, this one single unit right here, so 1 by 1 meter unit, we had all these posts lined up here. And I thought, I wonder if that's a wall. I better follow it. Well, turns out, yes, it's a wall. It's a series of walls, actually. This is structure 3. We identified this one in the summer 2021, back in June of this year. This one is very different from structure 1. First off, we have 3 corners. We haven't excavated much of this structure yet. We've just identified it. But you don't have an entryway on the corners. Instead, you have an entryway right here centered on the one wall. It's a very different kind of location, of course, from the corner. Structure 1, you had that double post at the entryway. Here, you have larger posts. You do have another post sitting out in front of this. We really checked very carefully here, and we do not have another post unless it's sitting just on the other side in this area that we haven't dug this here. This has not been dug yet. Maybe there's something here, but I doubt it. The distance there would be pretty far, and I really don't think that there'd be something there. So this structure, it's significantly larger than structure 1. Structure 1 measures almost 4 meters on each side. This one measures I think it's almost 7 meters on each side, or 8 meters maybe. It's pretty big, significantly larger than the other one. There were a couple of pits on the interior of this. We have excavated some of those pits. Those pits contain domestic debris. We don't have any evidence of any kind of a hearth yet. We're hoping that there's a hearth centered within this structure. Excuse me. We just haven't excavated that yet. We're planning to go in there maybe in March to excavate some more of structure 3 to really kind of take a look at it and figure out, well, what was it used for? What does it mean? Next, we have structure 4. This was identified back in May and June again this year. This is the purple line of posts. We have a nice corner, a nice 90-degree angle. And there was some debate among myself and some colleagues on whether or not this was a structure. And I really thought, I think it's a structure, but yeah, we don't have enough evidence yet to really suggest that it's truly a structure. So I decided to have another excavation campaign, and that is what we're in the middle of right now. In fact, we started on Monday, and we're going to be excavating through the end of this week and then through the end of next week as well. So I actually have some updates here, and this is like as almost real time as you can get for archaeology. We got out of the field at 4 p.m. and I was finishing our maps up until almost 6 o'clock, just to make sure that we have the maps digitized and I can show this to everybody. I'm pretty confident it's a structure now. Those purple line, the purple dots are the posts, and you can see that they do curve around and they make that square. They complete another corner there. We plan to continue excavating this to try to follow it out some more. We're going to continue tomorrow and then over the rest of this week and next week. The center of this structure is going to be located, I have to think about that. It's in this unit right here. And that's one that we're hoping we can get to later this week. We're going to be excavating over here and here tomorrow, these two right here, to expand and follow the wall basically. And really try to get a better sense of how large the structure is and where the entryway is. I suspect that this might be the entry here, but it really seemed quite insignificant when we were excavating it. So I'm not sure if there would be a corner entry or if that is the entry. That entirely could be. We just don't know yet. So let's think about these and compare these different structures to each other, because really the architecture here is what to me is really kind of important, because we don't get to see a lot of architecture from the Middle Woodland. We get to see lots of projectile points, lots of arrowheads, lots of pottery, but architecture is one thing we don't get to see a lot of. So let's go ahead and try comparing these. So we're comparing structures 1, 3, and 4 as of today, October 13th, 2021. And again, this could change tomorrow when we find more posts on structure 4. Okay. So structure 1 is square in plan. It measures 4.28 by 4.29 meters. And you have the entry situated on the western corner of that. And you have that odd shallow pit across the entryway as well. Kind of maybe a liminal boundary between space. Structure 3 to the north, that's the big one up on top. Again, it appears to be square in plan. It measures 6.71 by 6.74 meters, so significantly larger than structure 1. And here you have the entrance situated centered on the southwest wall. So rather than having on the corner, it's centered on that wall. You also have structure 4. It appears to be square as far as we can tell. We still have a lot of work to do on it. It's 4.33 meters by an unknown variable. We only have the 2 corners, so we can't make any assumptions yet on the exact size. And we might, as I pointed out, we might have that entrance or entryway on the northwest wall, along that northwest wall. If we had the entryway on that northwest wall, that means that the entries to all 3 structures face the same direction. And it makes me wonder, well, what's out in that area? Why, this to me comes back to that sense of community. These are not necessarily individual structures that are unrelated. To me, these structures are related. They are a part of a planned community, not necessarily someone up on top planning where everyone's going to put their structure and where they're going to face and all that, but planning on maybe the individual household level, but those plans are somewhat congruent with everybody else. It seems to be a shared organizational planning because they're facing each other. Likewise, if you look at structure 4 on the bottom, the purple one, and structure 1, the red one in the middle, those walls are parallel to each other. That's, to me, really interesting. Also, the structure 1, some of those walls, the red ones, are parallel more or less with the green ones for structure 3. So again, it seems that there's some planning involved here. And I think we need to take a closer look at that planning in the future. So not only do we need to study the artifacts to understand their economic networks and all, but we need to think about some of these harder to get at topics, such as community, such as identity. Is this a kinship group? Is this a group of people who were related to each other? Maybe they're related through a nuclear family. Maybe they're related through an extended family. Maybe they're related because they're members of the same clan. We don't know. And these are some of the questions that we're going to ask here to try to understand this community and to try to contextualize them in the past. And a big part of that is going to be working with descendant populations, because there's no reason not to. So, okay. So let's talk about some future directions here. I think I've talked enough about the structures, but let's talk a little bit about where we're going in the future. We have some more extensive analysis of stone tools, pottery, micro botanicals, and macro botanicals, and spatial orientation. So with the stone tool analysis, we've done some blood residue analysis. Unfortunately, it was all inconclusive, but we're doing some use wear analysis, where we take the stone tools and put them under a microscope, and we look at the microscopic wear patterns to determine how they were used, what they were used to cut, if they were used. And there's some really cool data that we're getting out of that, that helps us understand what people were processing. Were they cutting vegetable material? Were they cutting wood? Were they cutting meat? Were they scraping hides? And we can see that on some of those stone tools. Not all of them, but some of them. Next, we have the pottery analysis. I'm going to be doing a stylistic analysis of the pottery, to try to look at teasing out patterns in terms of where they're found, in terms of what proportions they're found in, and of course, looking for residues on those pots, because pots are cool, but pots hold things, right? If you think about a milk jug in your fridge, it's not all that cool. Stuff inside is what you care about. The pottery is not all that cool. It looks nice, it preserves well, that's great. But it's the stuff that was inside that counts. It really, to ignore the contents of the pots is to ignore a massive component of culture, because food is a major part of culture, right? We want to know, what were they eating, and how often would they eat it? Would they eat a lot of meat? Were they eating a lot of fish? Were they eating were they stewing a lot of nuts? What are they doing? And this ties back to our microbotanicals. We're doing a microbotanical analysis where we've already conducted some pollen results, and we've collected some phytolith results. And we're looking at microscopic evidence of botanical remains to understand the past environment, contextualize that environment that the Middle Woodland people inhabited, and to understand maybe what domesticates they are starting to plant, what they're cultivating. And what they're relying on within that local environment. We also are looking at macro botanicals. These are our carbonized seeds and nutshells, to see what, again, tell us about the environment, but also tell us about what they're selecting to eat. And that's a lot of fun. We also are looking at the spatial orientation of the site itself. Where are they situated on the landscape? They're on a slight rise along the river. And with that slight rise, are there structures down off of that slight rise? When I was there in March excavating, we actually were there on a clear day, but we had a lot of rain up in the mountains just north of us the day before. And when that rain finally worked its way down those swollen rivers to where we were, the river rose and it crested its bank. And we had a flash flood on our hands. We didn't even notice it. We were too focused looking at the ground in front of us, because that's what we do as archaeologists. It took the landowner driving out through the flooded field to say, hey guys, what are you doing? Look around. And we realized that where the site is on that slight little rise, and we were just high enough that we were dry. And the cars we took in were dry. And we thought, well, now we got to drive out. So, we want to look at that spatial orientation and how are they using the landscape and where are they limiting themselves within that landscape. So really all of that ties into contextualizing past lifeways on the site. We want to know, how did people live out there? What were they consuming? What do they eat? What was the environment like? If you want to go to the site today, you can stand out there and you will hear helicopters and airplanes and a lot of traffic. That's not what you would have heard in the past. Think about the soundscape of the past. You wouldn't have heard that. It would have been a very different environment, just audibly, let alone the whole, you want water, you have to walk over to the river and get it. And you better know where you're going to get it from, because you don't want to be getting your water downstream where people are dumping their garbage. So we need to think about contextualizing past lifeways on the site, not just, what people ate, but also thinking about that environment. The paleo environment is very important. If we don't understand the paleo environment, we cannot understand how people lived in that environment. We also want to think about those relations between different groups of people, different families maybe within that community, because it is a community. It's not just a single, little house on the prairie type situation. We have multiple structures together. What were they used for and how were they related to each other? Finally, we're moving on to publication of results. Just the other day, I got word that Dr. Dan Bigman and I, together with Dominic Day, we months ago submitted an article for publication in Archaeological Prospection, and that finally just got actually published in Archaeological Prospection just on Monday, I think. I forgot to put that in this. I should have put that up in this presentation. But we also have there's something in the profile. The SGA, the Society for Georgia Archaeology, has a newsletter called The Profile. We just got a little tiny blurb, 2-page blurb in that the other day. And we have reports coming out in the 2020 issue of Early Georgia. That's delayed. The publication's delayed because of COVID, and the 2021 issue as well. So we have a lot of stuff that's starting to work its way into publication. We have other analyses that we are currently working on that will lead to publications. So that's the future direction here. It's not just that we collect data, but we interpret that data on the site, and then we tell everybody else about the data and our interpretations. That's the publication end of it. That's the really fun and enjoyable part for me, is figuring out the site and then letting other people know about it and sharing my excitement about that site. So I just want to have a couple quick acknowledgements here. First, I'd like to thank UNG Center for Undergraduate Research and Creative Activities. They have provided a lot of funding over the years to conduct ground penetrating radar, magnetometer, blood residue analysis. They funded the purchase of equipment. There's a lot of little things here that they did. Also, University of North Georgia's History, Anthropology, and Philosophy Department, where I teach, they have kicked in some funding to support equipment purchases. Of course, this would never have been possible without the hospitality and the laughter and the camaraderie of both Billy and Teresa Rice, the landowners. And finally, I can never thank enough my volunteers, as well as all the students who have excavated on the site. We've had more than 300 people come out to the site at different times. Not all at once. I don't want a zoo on my hands, but we've had more than 300 people out there. And it's really wonderful to share that with the community and let them see that this stuff is here. Archaeology is all over the place. And you may look at a field and you may say it's just a field, but that was someone's home before. Someone else lived there. That's their land in the past. So it's really fun to do that, engagement with the public, with students, with volunteers. I really love that. So just to remind everybody, I will be on site excavating Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. the rest of this week and all of next week, unless there is severe weather, in which case I'll be sitting in my car hoping that it goes away, blows over. So other than that, I really want to thank my field school students. I didn't give them a chance to chat because it's kind of odd on Zoom, but I'm sure they can chime in with the discussion at the end here. So thank you very much. Jack, I think you're muted. Hold on, Jack. I'm asking you to unmute. There we go.
Okay, how's that?
That's better.
Okay. You have students who want to have something to say, Bill?
Yeah, let me see who's in here still. I can start calling on people. I guess let's begin with, let's search for some volunteers. Any of my students that have been out there want to volunteer?
Can you put the whole screen where we can see all the faces?
It's up to you. That's your choice, Jack.
That's your choice. Yeah, you can do
Oh,
that.
how do I do that?
It's up on top.
There's one particular student right now that I'm hitting the ask to unmute button over and over.
So sorry. Sorry. Probably all saw me sneezing. I'm having severe allergies. It's been really crazy here in DeKalb, Illinois. But the site was incredible. We had a lot of fun. And I remember that, like, I actually got pictures of the day that we found the doorway to structure 3. That was really cool. If you want to see pictures of Dr. Balco, kind of like really excited. I got them. But one thing too I wanted to mention, I don't know if we can show it again, but structure 4, yeah, sure, the purple one. I wanted to make sure people knew that that little gap on the northwest wall is because that was one of the first units that we excavated, and we went a little too deep. So there's probably actually a post that we just didn't get to see because we like went straight through it. So
Oh, there's still time to change your grade. I would never do that. So yeah, I would.
Oh,
but yeah, I don't know if anybody were able to see me when he showed that. I haven't seen that because obviously he just made that map. That's super exciting because also like it's like perfectly, it's almost the same exact size as structure 1, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah,
and I kind of
yeah,
know why.
I'd love to know why also. There's some other similarities with structure 1, but we're waiting to publish.
okay. Thank you, Anita.
Anna, really quick, Anna, how's grad school going?
It's going well. I'm currently looking into trying to figure out like exactly which direction I'm going with my thesis. I was initially doing contact period in like, you know, North America, but I might actually be doing the Caribbean now. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Sure. Anna was one of our field school students this past summer. She was a UNG student, and now she is a master's student at Northern Illinois University. So she's moved on. And Patrick, you want to say anything?
Yeah, we also, it wasn't discussed too much here today. There were a few other units that were dug on the other side of the field
Way
that I
over
worked on for
here,
a little
yeah.
bit.
Way over here.
Yeah, so that's where I spent a few weeks with a smaller crew. There were a few anomalies that were detected through GPR that we wanted to investigate. One of them ended up being a bit of red herring. It was just an animal den. Some animals had burrowed underneath and got picked up in the radar. The other one, I'm not sure exactly what Dr. Balco ended up thinking it was, but there were some cultural artifacts in a pit feature that could have been some sort of hearth or earth oven that we unfortunately discovered in one of the final weeks of the field school. So we had to rush to get through it.
Yeah,
that was
it
was a very fun field school to be a part of.
Yeah, it turns out that was a nut roasting.
Okay.
Oh, very good.
So I'm actually really curious about that because I want to go back to that spot and dig around it to see if there's more, because the GPR anomaly suggests that there's 2 of them together. There's actually another anomaly just to the southeast of it. And I'd like to investigate that and see what that is. Because that's a very big nut roasting pit. And I'm kind of toying with this idea of feasting here.
Mhm. Yes. Patrick,
Yes.
if you haven't heard of it yet, there's a Murphy's Law in archaeology that says the really neat stuff comes out on Friday, the last week of the dig.
Bill told me all about it, and we got to see it firsthand.
Yes.
And Patrick was a field school student of mine in Sicily in 2018, right? And then he served as the TA, the teaching assistant for the field school this past summer. And he is now, he graduated from UNG, and he is now a master's student at Georgia Southern.
Very good. Very good. That's a good
Continuing the tradition of people who've been on field schools with me that go on to grad school. There's quite a few of them.
Yes. Yes. Do
But
you have
what
other
questions do people
Other
have?
students want to ask questions or make contributions? Yes.
If you have
Oh,
questions, you
that's-
can easily put the questions in the
Tony held up his
discussion in the
hand.
chat.
Yeah, I've tried the chat before. It did not work well for me. So I
Oh.
just would like to ask the question straight up if I may.
Yeah.
Okay. Structure number one, Bill. 5 meters by 5 meters is a pretty large structure, but your fire pit in the center being with clean fill and the lens of a little bit of material and then covered over with clean material. Do you think that could be a sweat lodge possibly?
So that was actually my very first interpretation of that structure. And so because of that, I started looking into that possibility right away when we found it, before we even dug the whole thing. So when we were digging in 2019, it was a July and August archaeological field school, which was a horrible decision to do it that late in the summer, you know. But I remember when we found that, I started reading right away up on sweat lodges because I thought this has got to be a sweat lodge. Yeah, there's some things in there that tell me maybe it's a sweat lodge, but honestly, there's some issues with it. I've spoken to some tribal members who participate in different Inipi ceremonies. Now I know that that's Siouan and it's not Muskogee or it's not Cherokee, but they were saying that a 1.40 meters across for the pit is incredibly large and that they've never seen one that's that wide. That pit is also about 70 centimeters deep, and they said that's really deep for a sweat lodge. All of the ethnographic and ethnohistoric material that I've come across suggests that sweat lodges would be built near water. Okay, we're right next to the Etowah River. That the entryway would face, in most cases, the entrance would face the river. Ours faces away from the river, which it's okay, that's fine. There's some that face away. But that usually the sweat lodge is somewhere situated away from the village, away from the settlement, because it's more of a ritual thing and not necessarily something that you have within the settlement itself. And I thought, well, that would be great as long as there's nothing else around this thing, but there's clearly a settlement there. So I don't know what to think about it. I really don't. I have thought about that sweat lodge idea. I think that structure 4 is really going to help us understand the function of structure 1, because I'm hoping that we do not find a pit full of carbonized material and rocks above it and clean fill. I'm hoping we do not find that. The one similarity between structure 1 and structure 4 that I have not mentioned, I've kind of been avoiding it. We have a lot of crystal quartz flakes in structure 1. And we have a lot of flakes of very tiny flakes of a dark, it's not chert, it's a dark stone that I don't know what it is. I have to figure out what it is. And when you get that dark and light dichotomy, that's a Hopewellian thing. That's a thing that you see coming down from Ohio Hopewell and anybody who's interacted with them. So I'm almost wondering if it has some other ritual function. I have spoken with some other archaeologists in Georgia, and they've noticed on their Middle Woodland sites that they have that same dark or black and white dichotomy, and they feel that there's something ritual with it. I've even heard that if you take crystal quartz and you nap it in the dark, if you crack them or smack them together in the dark to make them shatter, that it actually will fluoresce. It'll actually like spark. So I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know where they're getting this stuff either. I don't know where the crystal quartz outcrop is. So I don't know if there's a crystal quartz outcrop right there on the property, then it would be no surprise that you find a lot of it, right? But if there's no crystal quartz anywhere nearby, then where are they getting it, and how valuable is that material, or how rare is that material, right? So yeah, I've thought about the sweat lodge thing, but I haven't ruled it out 100%, but I'm not too keen on it right now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Other students? Other comments?
I had a quick
Comment,
question.
questions?
Yeah, I got two questions. Okay, so with the three structures they're kind of almost going in a semicircle kind of shape right now. It's kind of what it looks like. Do you think that could be evidence of like the presence of a plaza? And if it is, how would we would an absence of like other structures, obviously no structures, but like pits, confirm that?
And I'm going to show you something that I shouldn't show people.
Thank you, Anna.
So there's a program called Arcgis that some students learn about. It's a big mapping program we have. I'm in Arcgis right now. Can you see that? I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me zoom out a bit. This is our big mapping. If you want to see how we make maps, we have to I put them on these sheets of paper, and then I have to tell the paper where to go, and that's what it looks like until I then digitize it. Okay, and I create everything. So that's actually stuff that we excavated today that you don't need to see because you haven't. It's tied to something else actually. Lots of plow scars and stuff. We did some ground penetrating radar out here, right? And that's helping us to guide where we should dig. So this is the ground. I'm going to turn the ground penetrating radar on that shows everything at 50 centimeters down. Okay, because you can ask it to look at 50 centimeters down. You can ask it to look further down than that. This is at 50 centimeters. There's a pattern, especially when you look at structure 4. Structure 4 stays within the dark. I think it only comes over here and then it curves back around. I think you can see structure 4 pretty clearly there. Structure 1, this was that anomaly that we targeted that turned out to be the big pit. And you can kind of see a dark outline here. The light colored stuff indicates a lot of rock, really dense material. The darker stuff shows less dense material. So I think that they're throwing their garbage out and they have a lot of rock that they're heating up for fires and for cooking. And then when it breaks, they throw it out. And I think they're creating this big area of thrown out rock. And that's what's causing these big kind of like dull gray, light gray areas. This was clearly the big pit full of rock. If you look on here, you have a pit full of rock right here inside structure 3, right? Let me turn on, hold on, let me come in here, sorry. I gotta change some things around so it shows different layers. Takes a minute to load, especially because I'm on Zoom. See that right there? That really light colored thing? Let me change this to a different color so that you don't, what color are we not using? We're not using something obnoxious.
Yellow or something?
How about, oh yeah, there we go. Something straight out of the 70s, like some 70s like furniture, right?
There you go.
This pit here was full of rock. This was just off by 10 centimeters. 20 centimeters. This pit had a lot of rock in it. It's off by about 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters. Okay. So we have these pits full of rock and they're showing up. And if we come down here, this is that big pit with that big signature. This one had a bunch of rock. This had a bunch of rock, right? So it's the rock that's showing up as the light. And then the dark is the area where you don't have a lot of rock, which is where the walls are. So to come back to this, we see it a little bit with structure 3 here. But if you look, if I zoom out, here's another one. Here's another one up here. Here's another one. There's another one here. There's another one here. Another one here. Another one. Anna, it's not a ring. It's that this landform comes across this way and they're just situating them on that landform. I think we have clusters that are tied back to family units or maybe kinship groups that, you know, if we had 15, 20 years to test these things, not excavate the whole thing, but test them, to sample them, we might be able to understand that better, but I think we have a, I don't think we have that kind of time. So did that
Anna,
answer your question, Anna?
Absolutely.
thank you for
Sorry, I couldn't hear
asking,
you.
Anna. I was about to ask him the same thing. I still think
And
it's
if we want
probably
to look at,
12 out there.
oh yeah, there's more of them. And then if we look at the thing Patrick brought up, I don't want to ignore Patrick's thing here. So they had a lot of rock. This is all the rock in their pit. You can see all the rock has been mapped out in all these units. It's just a pit full of rock. That's all they had. And it, I mean, if I turn on the pit, there's the pit. It actually does extend up in here, but that was classified as a hearth, not a pit. So I just need to change the classification. But yeah, it's a big nut roasting pit. And the same thing, we can do the same thing actually over here. This is the big hearth inside structure 1. You can see each and every individual rock laid out in by stratum. You know, it's a pretty dense area with rock. So then you get a couple other little rocks here and there that were mapped, but really there's not much else in this. So, other questions?
I had one more question. So
Sure.
around that nut roasting pit, has there been, with finding other nut roasting pits, is there often a structure around it, or are those often outside?
I don't know. That's something I'd have to look into. It depends, I think, on if you have feasting areas that are purpose-built feasting areas. You might have an area where they go off and they want to have a big gathering, and so they need to have space. I've worked on a site in Wisconsin where we had a nut roasting pit that was just gigantic. It was like 3 meters across. It was big, and there was absolutely nothing around it. About 100 yards away, we had a storage pit. That's it. There was nothing out there. That was pretty crazy. But that site was the site of burial mounds, some linear, conical, and an effigy mound that had all been plowed down in the late 1800s. And they were building a highway. They were putting a highway bypass around Baraboo. And so that's why we were there. And so we had that big, massive nut roasting pit, which was probably associated with a feast tied to the construction of the mounds or ancestor veneration or something along those lines. That's what we interpreted it as, but we have no idea. So
I just wanted to ask one thing. Do you still need some volunteers?
sure, come on out.
Okay.
We're coming out, bring gloves and bring water. I forgot to mention, everybody, bring water. You know, because it gets hot. It does get very hot. So I bring a couple gallons of water for myself, because I'll drink a gallon of water a day. It's that hot still. I mean, this is some great August weather right now, isn't it? So
Yes.
it's just, you know, August and September. October is the new August, you know, so yeah.
All
Hey,
right. that
hey,
sounds
Bill,
You got
Bill,
it.
I got a
Yeah.
question. You mentioned,
Sure.
you know, a lot about the structures and a lot about the pits, but are the artifacts telling you anything? For instance, where they're concentrated, how they're laid out on the land? I mean, is that telling you anything, or is it just a whole bunch of background little
It might.
artifacts?
I haven't completed the artifact analysis for 2021 yet. I have everything through 2019, but I don't have it for 2021 yet. I just haven't had the time to sit down and do the analysis. Once I do the analysis, then I can plug it in and I can start toying with what's found in structure 1, what's found in structure 2, even though 2 is, here, I'll show you structure 2. I don't know why I didn't. Let me turn on structure 2. So let me zoom out a bit. 1, 3, and 4, oops. 1, 3, and 4 are up here. Structure 2 is way down here. And that's all I have of structure 2, okay? So it's there, but that's all I have. And actually the pottery associated with structure 2 seems to be late woodland and not middle woodland. So there might be a late woodland component to the site that's further south on this ridge. So that's a whole nother issue. But yeah, I plan to go through and do the pottery analysis for the structures and the area with the big nut roasting pit, because actually that nut roasting pit area is very cool because it's a part of a big midden, a big sheet midden full, just chock full of pottery. And so I need to look at that as well to see, well, what's going on out there? What's going on over here? From just what I've seen when we're excavating on structure 3 has a very different function than structures 1 and 4. I'm not sure if I would call it domestic. It certainly could be, but I think it might have to do with status. I don't want to go into too much detail because I want to wait until we excavate all of structure 3 to figure out if there is a pattern that I've observed. I think Anna probably knows what I'm talking about because Anna was excavating it and she found some stuff that that might be very interesting. It's not human remains. We don't have any human remains on the site. So if people are wondering about that, we have not found any human remains at all. If we did, we would have stopped and we would have called the state archaeologists and contacted the tribes. But yeah, it's not human remains, but we have something else in there that makes me wonder about status. And so I'm wondering if structure 3 is not something tied to community and status together. And I just need to really spend some more time thinking about it. So give you a long answer, but make a short, Cliff. I don't know yet. Sorry, man. It's something I'm working on. I love doing pottery analysis, but it's hard when you have a 3-year-old. So,
Okay.
If it's pottery analysis, which is my daughter wanting to hang out and watch Coco Melon or whatever else she's watching at the moment, the Jurassic Park animated series for kids. I'd rather go spend the time with her. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much,
thanks.
Bill. It's been a great presentation tonight.
Yeah.
Sure.
Are there any other questions before we wind this up? Are you
So,
getting
say
anything?
thank you, Bill.
You got it.